I'm John,
I'm Randall.
ready to start this podcast off because I think the first time that we actually talked was way back when we were seeing the inflation, economic inflation, the rise of ICE in America, and how a lot of people doubted what I said first about it starts with immigrants and ends with the opposition, saying that this will never happen to American citizens, kind of leading us into where we're at now politically. Um, I know you and I had that really long phone conversation where it's just seeing the hypocrisy of the right, seeing the fascism that's out there is pretty crazy right now. So,
Yeah, I think that the lashback from the Biden presidency is kind of what's being felt right now. There's nothing really to be said for people that immediately have this notion that, oh, Biden's presidency was so awful for me, oh, this, that, and the other, when there was a worldwide pandemic happening that hadn't happened, on that scale since the Spanish influenza over 100 years ago. So no one really had a basis for how to get, a handle on things. So everything coming from a company that's in the manufacturing space, we didn't have a handle on how to manufacture our products, moving to a distributor who then had problems with getting them on people's shelves at the retail space, who then had problems, selling those to customers at the customer space. There's these so many things that built up across every industry that led to inflation that then made Joe Biden's presidency, in a lot of even Democrats' eyes, seen as a kind of a failure or a lame duck president, when in reality I can name several, the Chips and Science Act. There were several big movements that got through, even though he never controlled the House and the Senate for the remainder of his presidency. He lost control of it, I believe, halfway through 2022.
right,
Um,
midterms there.
so like it's one of those things where people kind of are already predisposed to have a negative opinion and then think, oh well, it'll be great to flash back to Donald Trump and there'll be this huge flashback. And that's kind of what we're facing now is Republican people are kind of rubbing their noses or rubbing, Democrats and independents nose and the Joe Biden presidency like it's a bad thing. I personally thought it was a great presidency.
Yeah, and I don't want to talk too much about right yet with what's going on with the Kirk assassination here. We have a couple episodes before I think we're really going to dive into that. But one of the things that's very apparent right now is with the what we're seeing with the cancel culture of the right now, with essentially if you take Charlie Kirk's quotes and you direct quote them, people are trying to get people fired over that. So kind of seems less like morals and more like revenge at this point. And like you're saying, kind of pointing out, uh, yeah, just kind of getting revenge for what had happened during Biden. And interestingly enough, we're talking about the economics of where we're at now. You can point back to presidents taking over and economies tanking shortly thereafter. I mean, when the 2008 housing crisis happened, you could make the argument that Clinton was somehow responsible due to the right for everyone to own a home, pushing that revitalization of the American dream. And then you get the no income, no job loan applications that led to all of the the crash.
The last time this country had a national surplus was during the Clinton presidency.
Right.
It's an uncomfortable fact for a lot of people.
Yep. And so where we're at now is we're now in an economy where one switch was flipped and we're in immediate decline. And I think people are a little bit blind to that as soon as the tariff switch got turned on, we are where we are. So Trump inherited the highest level in the market to date, I believe.
Hmm.
He
Yep.
inherited,
Stock market was at the all-time high in January 3rd, I believe, and then there was the announce of tariffs January 6th. And I'm not sure how your portfolio looked, but mine still hasn't recovered.
yeah, my portfolio.
There is that. to the credit of a lot of people and supporters of that side of the economic policy decisions, there was a deep recovery V, as you call it in the stock industry, where you see the sharp decline and then a sharp incline back. But a lot of people, that decline ruined people,
Yeah.
ruined people, and not only that, that decline also was a very convenient time for a lot of people in Congress to jump on, like Palantir, for example,
Oh yeah.
stock investments that were incredibly well, priced before these decisions were made by the current presidency, and then all of a sudden, after they were privy to that information, they made some purchases and made a pretty, sizable chunk of change,
Yeah.
more change than you and I will ever see in a trading lifetime.
I mean, don't be so negative. I mean, we might. You never know.
You never
They
know.
claim
This
that
podcast might take off.
they claim that the Powerball got claimed. I believe, right? Two of them, wasn't it? Missouri and somewhere
It's
else.
like yeah, it was there was a California one, I believe.
Yeah.
It was a California like liquor store or something.
Apparently, we had some $50,000 or $100,000 winners here in the state. I don't know though if someone hits the whole thing. Though I don't think anyone gets the smaller winnings. Do they?
No, I think they still get the smaller
Do they?
winnings. That's like yeah, it's all compartmentalized. But then you got to take it in like payments,
Yeah.
right?
We were
That's a smart way to do
we were
that. Those
talking about
lifetime
this.
payments.
My buddy and I were talking about the better option, and I am of the opinion that you just take the cash and run rather
The
than
lump
take
sum.
the annuity, and then you can figure out how to make back what you lost in taxes and what you lost with taking the lump sum.
It's just trying to stomach what a 55% tax loss
Yeah.
immediately.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when we hit
But hey,
Powerball, the government hits Powerball too. So
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not just.
That's one of those things though, where if you got the money, like you said, you can try probably recoup
Oh
that.
yeah.
If you get a $200 million loan from daddy, you might be able to become a success.
Yeah. You never know.
Life's a little easier.
Yeah. Um. Let's see here. I think that you and I we both shared a similar economic standpoint. Bringing kids into the world may have not been the best idea under these circumstances,
Yeah.
and that looking at their future, um, unless you help them out with real estate, the the ability to achieve the American dream has really fallen by the wayside, and it's really just what is the American dream even anymore?
I completely agree. I think we're the first age that has to have that mindset of, is it economically viable to um have a child in America these
Yeah.
days. And I don't mean that, obviously, there's always been people that were less fortunate that had to have that decision for their own standings. I'm just saying, like you said, from the greater overall perspective of the American dream.
Yeah.
I don't think it's viable for people to think that they can afford a white picket fence,
Yeah.
and a house in a cul-de-sac. I don't think that is being set up by the ruling classes and people, the kind of, for lack of a better word, the American oligarchy that's kind of being formed right now. um Americans are kind of set up to just be consumers,
Yeah.
and consume products, and consume the next thing to get brought out and put on media, and everyone decide they need, and life, it becomes a lot more expensive for the everyday
Yeah.
American. So
We'll get more into that too. I think when we talk about some of these political assassinations going on, when we talk about what happened to the Blackstone CEO, and it wasn't even mentioned in a lot of the media, and how we're seeing people who are fed up too. Um, I think that also the disconnect between the generations too. I know that it's really hard to get through um, to the baby boomer generation, that we're struggling at a higher rate than they did. The income level required to own a home is just not what it used to be, right? And you could argue
yeah,
that
your summer job won't buy you a car these
no.
days.
And the phrase that I've used with them that pisses them off is that they had the luxury to be average, where our generation does not have that luxury. If you want to be a part of the American dream, you cannot be an average citizen of the United States. You have to be in the upper level of the United States economically.
There's always been positions in this country, like Oregon, for example. Oregon has used to have the law for you can't pump your own gas. You have to have someone at the gas station will stand there and pump your gas for you. And a lot of people in this out of state would look at that and be like, "Well, that's kind of crazy. Why can't I pump my own gas?" and think that that's a negative thing. That creates thousands and thousands of jobs across the state of Oregon for low education individuals, people with disabilities, people that need a job. And when you take things like that away and you don't raise, small jobs like that, menial jobs like that away, and you don't raise the minimum wage, how are the people starting out ever going to get a start?
Yeah.
It's kind of that trap that we fall into, where you apply for a job and you need 10 years experience for a starting position.
Yeah.
It's like, how does that
I
work?
know. And I think from talking with the older generations about our plight is one of the phrases that I've been using on Facebook that has been ruffling some feathers is an old phrase, and I believe it's an old military phrase that's shut up and color. Just don't worry about it.
Hmm.
Shut up and color. It also kind of describes the I suffered, so you're going to suffer as well. And I think that what I've been trying to convey to these folks of the older generation is that we we're not saying that we don't want to suffer. We're saying that we want the handshake you had and the level of suffering that you had. Because if you look by and large with the boomer generation, you can make the argument if they served in Vietnam, right, potentially due to the impact on them from that, which, a lot of them were drafted, they didn't have a choice. You could say that that led to an economic a poor economic outcome that we had, right? But if you're of the
Yeah.
boomer generation that avoided the draft, that was born in the late 50s and early 60s, you're the most privileged economic generation of the entire country, the entire history of this country. And then it kind of goes then into like I was saying, just the inability for us to be average to be able to own that home. And that there's two realities in America. You could be living on the same street with your neighbor who's older than you that falls into that category, and their realities are vastly different than what I know many of us millennials and the Gen Z, I don't even know what they're going to do. So,
Hmm. It's only going to get worse. They're going to start subletting their apartments over and over again, and you're going to get slum cities
yeah.
like you see in some other places of the world, where rent becomes unaffordable and you have to take on multiple roommates to afford to live in the area that you
Yeah.
work.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with, let's say, if you're trying, if I don't know what I'm trying to say here, like if you want to live right next to Central Park, maybe that is the case, right? Or maybe there's a call for some multi generational housing, right? Like, I don't know, it might be nice to have some grandparents, in who are able to help with the domestic duties and everything. But
A lot of it's a cultural thing. You have a lot of these other countries that have, like you said, multi-generational housing, where they take care of their elderly, and they treat them as honored members of the family unit and keep them around,
yeah,
and even take time off of work in order to stay as being a caregiver type of a situation.
yeah,
Whereas in America, you kind of just take grandpa to the home, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
So it comes a lot too from our culture.
for sure. The
uh
rugged
for
individualism,
what
bootstraps.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of sad too because really, I mean, it's sad. I felt this at the end of the summer, especially, like when, your wife's a teacher. So, when summertime happens, we may be working. I was actually thankfully working a little bit this summer. So that was nice. But just to have everyone at home to like not needing to have someone else watch your children, you know, kind of being
Yeah,
able to get
the cost of childcare alone.
to be
Good
able
lord.
to get this, we'll get there. Oh God. But to be able to experience a small glimpse of maybe what our parents had or their parents had with one person working and being able to have that dynamic, um,
Yep.
it's sad then to then be thrusted back into the school year of, okay, now we got the childcare, got to get everyone off to their own separate things, right? Everyone's so disjointed, living their own lives, and there is something American about that, but it also leaves me wondering, like, could there be a better way of doing things, but also being uniquely American too?
I have a uniquely American experience to this the end of our summer where, as you said, my wife's a special education school teacher. Her school district started the year on strike.
Hmm.
Not the teachers, however, but this time it was the unified school district staff. So, bus drivers, cafeteria lunch workers, janitors, the people that are generally kind of thankless in the school industry, which I'm sure you as know. Um, so they were all on strike for the first time in 56 years in the
56
history
years?
of Yep,
What?
they hadn't gone on strike, and this is one of the largest school districts in the
Yeah,
nation. Um, it's one of the largest. It's the largest in the state. One of those largest in the nation. They were on strike, and it kind of ended unfortunately. It was a 3-week strike. Um, the same people that the school district brought in to bargain on behalf of the school district 2 years ago when the teachers went on strike, they all got big fat cushy bonuses.
all the arbitrators and
Um,
lawyers and everything.
$32,000 in bonuses for each of them
Jeez.
for their services rendered when they had a strike go on. I think it was like 2 months. So it doesn't sound very efficient if you're hiring a negotiator.
Right. Let's
I wouldn't give them bonuses,
let's
but
slam
they
dunk
brought the
this thing
same
in
team
two
in.
in a week max, right? Couple days.
Yeah, they brought this same team in, and this strike lasted 3 weeks. It's now gone to legal arbitration, and these people work paycheck to paycheck. So when the school year doesn't start, they don't get paid. And a lot of these people can't afford to be on strike.
Yeah.
They need to be working. And so, when you show up to your district meeting, your union meeting, and the district is there outside of the building handing out pamphlets, of essentially, we're not going to pay you. You guys aren't allowed on school district property, this, that, and the other. It's really intimidating, and they hold the vote, and 60% of them voted to end the strike. So they're on strike for 3 weeks. They delayed the start of school. They don't get back pay, and they got absolutely nothing for it.
Ugh.
Absolutely nothing
See,
for it.
and that's the thing too, where optics matter, administrations matter, and knowing that at the top of the National Labor Relations Board is someone in your court if it goes that far. Because right now, there's not. Right now, it's completely anti-union, union busting. The guy, I don't know his name. Do you recall the new National Labor Relations guy?
No, I don't
He's
remember
also
his
tied
name,
to
but if
Project
he,
2025. Let's look this up really quick.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. He was one of the writers for that. And frankly, even if it went through, to the judicial system, I don't really have a lot of faith in the Department of Education to begin with. It, unless we settle it in a tables, ladders, and chairs match.
Yeah,
I don't think
with Linda
like it's
McMahon.
it's it's just this country has gotten to the point where it's a sick joke, and that's kind of always been the one of the things that, like, as a student of history, when I was in college, I majored in history. I that's all I do is just consume education, frankly, on history. When you look at things in this country, and you can repel or compare them back to narratives in, I hate to say, Germany in the 1930s, but there's a shocking amount of comparisons to be made where it's like, well, yeah, but this is democracy. That's how
That
that
doesn't mean it
fascism
can't
train
happen
got
here.
started there too. Yeah, when when you look at, like, what we were taught in school, and you go to social studies where we would learn about, the Constitution, we would learn about how the framers of government work, and everyone would be like, oh, there's the separation of powers. That's one of the main things you learn. The one government can never take over because the other two forms of our government
Checks
will
and
check them.
balances. Yeah.
And I would always, checks and balances, I would always sit there and just wonder to myself, But what happens if two of those team up on one?
Yeah.
Why aren't we talking about that? And then you look at,
Or willfully abdicates duties to another.
which is unfortunately both of those scenarios you and I just described are currently happening.
With
If you
the
look at what's happening with the House and the Senate, willful abdication of their jobs. If you look at what's happened with the control of the Supreme Court, Donald Trump has put 3 people in charge. Mitch McConnell made that happen by refusing to let Merrick Garland sit in a seat.
McConnell impersonation the other day, by the way.
Oh, just what's he do? Do you want to see mine? Or you just go like this?
Just stare off into the.
Give him a couple big blinks. But for in seriously, like when you look at how stacked the deck is in the Supreme Court, you start to think that you're looking at like Medici politics of the Italian Renaissance, the powers behind the throne that are making the decisions. It's not the grandeur that we see. It's the decisions that are being made without anyone's interest whatsoever being taken into account but their own.
And you know what is really is I don't even know the word I'm looking for. It's when you have
Corruption.
obviously, and you have these people who are influencing, you have MAGA influencers who are pushing a lot of this, right? And we saw it after Kirk's death, where there was the quote from Matt Forney, one of these MAGA influencers, and
I saw that
went on record saying that this is our nation's Reichstag fire. It's time to criminalize these Democrats and these ideologies. And the thing is that that's what Hitler did. So is it he's dumb in understanding what this actually means, or is because they're advocating do as Hitler did, do as he did? And we see where that goes. So what are they thinking that what is it willful, right? They willfully want to do this, and they willfully want to do as Hitler did. And let's be clear too. Let's be clear that using the word fascist and using words like Hitler and Nazi is protected under the First Amendment. And let's also be clear that Trump is on record in his campaign trail calling Harris those same words.
The divide in American politics today is between these far-left fascists led by Harris and her group. We have a fascist person running who's incompetent. She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. This is a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
So let's be clear. If you're going to hold us to the same standard, you need to hold.
Well, you can just quote the vice president and quote the vice president and say that he's America's Hitler.
Yes.
That's he's America's Hitler, J.D. Vance.
Yes.
That is a sentence that came out of that man's mouth.
He said, I believe the full quote is he's either America's Hitler or Nixon. I don't know. But you know, when you're being compared between Hitler and Nixon, that it's not good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Unpopular opinion? Nixon was actually a pretty good president.
I don't honestly, dude. I don't know.
As far as presidential politics went, he was actually a pretty good president, but he was so backhanded in that same type of stuff that I was just talking about, the shadow deals and that are made that make the shadow deals that happen that the illusion of the things that are happening. You think this is what's putting stuff in power, and this is the powers that be, when in reality it's deals that are made over here that no one sees. Yeah. For example, the ending of the Vietnam War. When Lyndon Baines Johnson was refusing to rerun for president when he realized he wouldn't have the vote for the Democratic nomination for president, it came down to Nixon and Hubert Humphreys, And Nixon, at the time, reached out to the North Vietnamese and essentially said, "Do not cooperate with the LBJ government. When we get in power, we'll give you a better deal."
Sounds similar to
And
maybe what people are claiming happened in the 2016 election.
yeah, I mean, these things are just different shades of gray. Everything that's why I sit here as a student of history and just kind of laugh every time I see something like this happen. I'm like, well, this has happened before.
Yeah.
It's the same narratives, just different players, different
And we
operators.
need to call
But to end my history
on
reference,
Nixon, yes.
on Nixon, the North Vietnamese refused to cooperate and reach the negotiating table, which stretched out the war, which made it look really bad for the Democrats, which then got the Republicans and Nixon
And
elected.
similarly,
So, and that was done with LBJ's knowledge, and he could have turned it over because that's high treason.
Yeah.
That's punishable by death.
and
What he
similarly
did.
to the Russia collusion in the election, and then even then going to the 2024 election
With Ukraine,
and when
with Donald Trump sitting on the campaign trail saying, "I'll end this war tomorrow."
and then
How, Donald?
it also relates to how Harris, when she came into power for Biden, how the Democrats wanted to push for some stronger border legislation, and the Republicans voted against it, essentially saying that it'll be for Trump when he gets into office, right? So what is it you're really for? Are you for what you
And how many
want, or are you
times have
for
they used
the
that
credit going
same
to
how
Trump?
many times have they used that same argument where you have them using that with immigration in the United States? It's easier to beat the drum for someone to say, well, we want John to fix this. We want John to fix this, even though someone else already has the equipment and the ability and is willing to do it. It's easier and more rousing for the rabble, for the crowd, for them to have that opinion,
Yeah.
than it is for them to actually do the work.
Yeah. So you talked a little bit about your background in history. You want to give us a little bit more backstory on why you feel passionate about talking what we did, wanting to start this podcast, and kind of where your background, where you feel like your background influences what we're talking about, and why I know I spent $300 today on VPNs and delete me stuff on the internet, and I know that I spent
Nice.
3 hours getting a 2011 Mac resurrected from the grave to do this. So
Yeah, my
both feel
my Mac
passionately.
from
So
college
let's
does
get your
not work
story.
anymore. Well, I graduated in 2013 from Pacific Lutheran University with a degree in history and reference in cultural and Caribbean genocide, slavery and genocide. So it's kind of a niche, degree.
Yeah, very niche.
But I have a lot of extremely, but I have a lot of reference when it comes to looking at how population units are treated, the literal definition of the articles of genocide that are established. There's just a lot of things that in my time talking with people from our age, older, younger, there's just a lot of uneducated people when it comes to the topics that we see, and a lot of that comes from just like the classic fake news, misinformation, kind of disinformation stream that people get exposed to, but a lot of it's willful.
Yeah.
A lot of people have chosen a side and then try to find the information that then supports their pre-drawn conclusions without really looking at the facts, looking at what happened, putting themselves in people's mindsets when making decisions in those situations, and trying to come away with it with an unpolitical view towards it. And so, like, when I was seeing things happening in real life that mirrored history, I would just sit there and laugh, and I would try to have these conversations with people on Facebook or social media that would just turn into screaming matches on the comment sections.
Yeah.
And you can only talk to so many people and provide them with so many articles that they just said that immediately say, well, I don't trust anything written by Reuters, before you're like, there's no point in even talking to you anymore. You're not even willing to have a discussionable debate. And so that's one of the things that I was looking for when having this, is it gives us the opportunity, if we wanted to bring someone in, be like, hey, if you feel like you have the ability and knowledge and facts on your side in order to argue your case, come on the show.
Yeah.
Come on the show and talk with us about it. We'll all have a conversation. And by the end of the day, I imagine, it's not my goal, but I imagine someone's going to made to look the fool. And I very, very doubt it's going to be you or myself. When given the opportunity to do research on something, I dive in. So if someone brings something new to my attention I didn't know about, I will sit there and dive in, and then make my, conclusions based upon the information discovered.
Yeah.
But it's not something where I come into this with a mindset of my guy's wrong, your guy's right, your guy's wrong, my guy's right. Anything like that. It's a more of a evolution of the moments that led to these conclusions and events to happen.
I think I come into the podcast with a different lens than you as far as why we came to the same evolution point, but we definitely converged on it in two different ways. So I also graduated from Pacific Lutheran University, studying biology, and I definitely was of the mindset that college was not for opening the mind, but for getting a job. And however, I did love my humanities classes, and I was paying attention in those classes in history and philosophy and religion. Um, and there were seeds that were planted there that I feel like even didn't maybe awaken until later with world experience, kind of had
Travel.
and work experience. So doing different jobs along the way out of college, trying to get into the healthcare field I thought I wanted to get into. Then going into a sales job, right, and trying to try to climb up that way. And then just some very interesting circumstances then led me into teaching. And I was still a teacher for several, probably 3-4 years, and was very conservative. I did vote for Trump the first time, and I got caught up in that. I showed a couple times some Jordan Peterson videos in my class, kind of with the lens of why do people choose the West? And you are born into a great time, which can be true, but it's not true for everyone depending on what you look like. And that's not something that I understood at that point.
Did you by chance watch the Jordan Peterson Jubilee special?
No.
Definitely give that a watch when you get a minute after this.
So, and then it wasn't until, honestly, till really looking at myself in the mirror as an educator and seeing also then working with kids, and especially refugee kids, say from Ukraine and Afghanistan, looking these children in the face and trying to think with the political lens that I had and that was instilled in me from a very young age, of this conservative attitude with regards to immigration, finances, everything. And you just can't do it. You can't look a child in the eyes and talk politics. You can't. You can't say that, yeah, kid, you're affected because of this, and I choose to affect you in this way through my vote and through how I feel about you politically, right? So it was humanization of immigrant children that really changed my lens and really has been like the woke point for me, right? And there's a reason why they call it woke, is because you cannot, as hard as I try. And there's some days that I wish that I could forget. There's some days that I wish that I could just go back to my old way of thinking, because it was a lot. It was much more. There's a reason they say ignorance is bliss, because I'm tortured sometimes by my reality and my lens now, because you cannot see it a different way. And culminating with everything where we're at now after the 2024 election, and just knowing how people like me, 10, 12 years ago used to think, or how they think and they talk and they act, and the catchphrases of the conservatism and the catchphrases of MAGA, is kind of what I hope to essentially do with this podcast, is to, I can already tell that a little bit, you're going to be a little bit bad cop and I'm going to be a little bit good cop. And we're going to try and hopefully get some people on here who we can educate and also humanize them as well. But we'll also have to draw lines and say that we are not going to be dehumanizing other groups of people either, because that leads us to where we're at. And either side should not be doing that. We need to humanize everybody. And one of the things I've been trying to draw attention to recently, we're kind of dancing around because we're getting this podcast started right after Kirk's shooting. I think it was a little bit personal for me too to get this up and going because we have so much to talk about, right? So how we can't make excuses for political violence, but we can also give a lens to the fact that people are oppressed, and when people that they view as an oppressor are taken out, right? Maybe that there might be a reason that they're saying the things that they're saying or celebrating, right? So
Are we talking about Palestine or are we talking about Charlie Kirk?
we're talking about Charlie Kirk, and we're talking about how
'Cause both those statements kind of fit. If people view someone as an oppressor and that someone has something happen to them, isn't it right or natural
Yeah.
to be happy?
Yeah.
And in that statement, like I said, goes both ways.
100%. So let's we got, like I said, we got a couple more episodes before we get into Charlie Kirk. So we're kind of also, we talked about us getting into this podcast, and I believe that really what got us here today was the idea of tariffs, right? Tariffs in the economy and what we're seeing with that. And I know you can speak to that because a lot of what you do is in Canada. So day one from the Canadian tariffs, you have been impacted by that.
Yeah, especially the very first article on the Canadian tariffs was agricultural products,
Oh,
which
wonder
if
what?
you don't know, yeah, well, in big ag too. If you don't know, if you're listening to this, the U.S. imports something like 86% of its big ag agricultural minerals from Canada. So
Meaning
that's just that's basically targeting steel essentially. Like you couldn't think of timber. You couldn't think of another more important product that you could immediately destroy the economy surrounding than agricultural inputs from Canada.
And then this
That's
is a question.
literally the number one export to us.
This is a question of my ignorance. Other things coming from Canada with agriculture, is that going to be stuff like your nitrogen additives and fertilizer and all this, or?
Yeah, your sulfur, nitrogen, iron, your heavy and micronutrient based minerals.
Yeah,
everything for big ag that happens down in the United States, in central half of the United States, or the eastern half of California, where most of our agriculture is grown in the States. I work for a nutrient company based out of Canada that imports stuff down here into the States, and frankly, it's not going to affect the tariffs aren't going to affect us as much directly as of now. We have a large supply of our products already in the States that we're working off, so it's not really that big of a deal for the people that think that creating these tariffs is going to create jobs. I haven't seen it. In the jobs report, maybe after a couple firings of the national job supervisor role, they'll find someone who will lie for them and say there have been jobs added in the manufacturing square.
one of the ways that
But
they're starting
we're
to do
what,
the big
9 months into the Trump presidency?
Yeah.
We're 9 months into the Trump presidency, and I can't name a single manufacturing base that's moved here that moved away.
Yeah.
If there's someone who knows one that can show me to, like I said, I love to research, but manufacturing in the United States isn't viable. Our labor costs here are far too expensive.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with us being too good to do the work. It has everything to do with our labor costs are too expensive. If you live in Eastern Europe and you need to hire a plumber to do a job like install a toilet or something like that, right, in a new house, the cost of labor in those countries is incredibly cheap. And so if you try to do something like that on your own, you're going to get made fun of by all the locals for not hiring someone to do it, because the cost of parts there is the expensive part. The cost of labor is cheap. Whereas here in the United States, the cost of parts is incredibly cheap. You can get anything you want from anywhere, delivered anywhere. But the cost of labor is extremely expensive. So it's one of those things where it's our culture again. It just comes back to Americans are kind of too expensive to do that job.
And it
That makes
really
sense.
also comes down to the fact that the United States dollar is the world reserve currency, and there is a price that we pay for that, and the labor cost is one of the
Absolutely.
unintended consequences of that. It's where we're at now. We get a benefit from being the world exchange currency, but it's not in our wages, right? It's the wages are more expensive in manufacturing and other industries. One thing I was going to say too is you're talking about the jobs report. One of the big lies, or one of the things I feel like they're already trying to do, is Stephen Miller, right, was on I don't know, whatever news agency,
I prefer to think of him as Nosferatu.
or
It's a really good reference
Joseph
for the
Goebbels.
deep cut for those that realize what he is. Yeah, or Goebbels. Yeah,
Goebbels.
Goebbels, modern day Goebbels.
And well, he's Goebbels incarnate. He even looks like the guy too, right? Like, you can't judge a book by its cover, but holy moly, the visual similarities are eerily striking. But
The funny, to make more references with him and Goebbels, the funny thing is Goebbels was weirdly a womanizer. That guy had so many women and a wife at the same time. He had multiple mistresses,
so
and they
he's
were
better
famous
at
movie
what Miller
actresses.
probably wanted to be good at, right?
That's what I was gonna say. Is meanwhile, Stephen Miller can't even hold on to his wife.
Yeah.
She's leaving him for
Musk,
Elon
right?
Musk. So
Yeah. Hey, I mean, when you got the bag, that's a big old bag. I mean, it'd be hard for me to say
yeah,
that.
right.
You know what I'm saying? A lot of money. I have a price.
It's a lot of money. I was gonna say I think we all have a price,
I got a
but
price.
that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
You got that Jeff Bezos money pretty soon.
But one of the things that Miller was saying is they want the jobs that are created by vacancies of immigrants being forcefully expelled from the country, they want to include that in the jobs report. So essentially saying that those jobs were created for American citizens because they kicked out the immigrants. Which is,
and are American citizens lining up to go pick strawberries, or are they not open to applications right now?
Yeah.
Are they not accepting applications?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I don't think that the jobs that those people are doing in the country, they're more than necessary. Absolutely, this country would fall apart without
100%.
the illegal labor that's happening all over the country. But I don't see, Senator Tommy Tuberville's son out there picking strawberries.
Absolutely not. And that's the thing too, right? We talk about the rich and the powerful, saying one thing and meaning another. It goes back to the college argument, where the same people who are saying that higher ed is a scam, right? There's no world that they would never send their children to university. There's no world we live in where Mark Zuckerberg's kids don't go to college. Even though he himself dropped out, there is absolutely no world that we live in where his kids don't go to college. And furthermore,
I think it's interesting to think, just to point out, the same political party that tells you higher education is a scam is the same political party that can say, quote, I love the poorly educated.
Yeah.
Like,
we also
those two things shouldn't run in the same union. Otherwise, you just have a massive voting block that is uneducated.
Yeah. Can we also point out the hypocrisy too from, couples meeting in college as well? Vance and his wife having met in college, saying,
Was that where they met? Usha?
Yeah.
Usha Vance, right?
Yeah. So you're saying that your life and your legacy and your children are in on the scam. So you met in college, just because college is a scam, right? They say, and what they're saying implies everything, right? So if you're going to imply that everything about it's a scam, then is your whole life and legacy a scam too?
Ohio State, that's right. I was trying to remember where he went to college. For some reason, I thought it was somewhere in Wisconsin. I was way wrong. Ohio State, and then a law degree at Yale Law School.
I absolutely love the character that they
They
made.
should
JD
look
Vance
back at
on
their
South
teachers
Park.
back then and see who was teaching them.
He's arguably my favorite character on the new South Park season, little JD Vance.
I actually, not to bring us back again and again and again to Charlie Kirk, but the Cartman Charlie Kirk made me die laughing
And
when
the
it
thing
happened.
too is
I thought it was really funny.
Charlie Kirk loved he's an asshole, and Cartman's the asshole, right? If you believe he said things that needed to be said, if you're of that opinion, he is of the asshole. He's going to ruffle some feathers, and that's exactly, if you're familiar with South Park, you need to be familiar that that's the character that Cartman has played throughout the history of South Park. It's incredible.
I think it was Laura Loomer. I think it was Laura Loomer or
Laura Loomer called for the
it might have
execution
been
of the
Nancy.
immigrants. She said the alligator Alcatraz quote that said something about the number of Hispanics in the country, and then essentially how many they have to feed to the alligators. That's how crazy this person.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Laura Loomer is, that's how crazy this gal is.
I think it was her, or it might have been Nancy Mace. One of the two of them made a comment about
Mace,
South Park,
fuck.
saying that the Trey Parker and Matt Stone are culpable in what happened, and if it weren't for them specifically targeting and demonizing Charlie Kirk, that this wouldn't have happened. And I'd like to point out that
Charlie Hebdo.
that's
Anybody?
what
Charlie Hebdo.
That's what Star Trek, or excuse me, South Park does is make fun of current world issue politics. So if that was the case, why did no one kill Barbara Streisand or any of the other multitude of people? Kanye, he likes gay fish. He likes fish sticks. Like what are we talking about here? To have that equate to this shutdown cancel culture narrative that we were talking about before, where it's like, oh, we got to cancel South Park now because they made a Charlie Kirk episode in the past.
Well,
that's fucking insane.
And then also, if you're of the
it's completely insane.
If you're of the mindset that South Park is culpable in Kirk's death, then you are essentially saying that Charlie Hebdo, and if those of you that don't know, Charlie Hebdo made and posted a picture of Muslim God in a political cartoon, and then Charlie Hebdo was gunned down by Muslim extremists, Islamist extremists. So then
it's like 2011, I think, 2013.
So then
something
you're
like that.
of the same camp as if you're saying you're of the same camp, you're giving a reason then to those Islamist extremists that they had the right to do what they do. If you're saying that Trey Parker and Matt Stone are culpable in Kirk's death, you're of that mindset that essentially Hebdo had it coming. But the call back at the time from conservatives was a decrying. They decried the act. So saying that we then need to go after the extremists then at that point.
I think as more news comes out about what's happened for that, we'll obviously cover it. I think it's vastly irresponsible to sit down on podcasts like a lot of people are, not you and I, but a lot of people are, and throwing out the they word. They killed Charlie. It's like, well, who's they? We don't know anything yet.
Some theories, but yes,
it's one of those things though where there's already a lot of people that are like trying to dive into that, and it's just insanity how many things have changed on the story and the narratives and stuff. And it's just as likely as a. I'll leave it with this, but I'll say it's just as likely as a possibility that. The person that did this was disillusioned from Charlie's own side, or one of these other conservative podcasters, your Benny Johnsons, your Tim Pools, your Nick Fuentes, I believe. Yeah, I think it was like supposedly really connected with that guy's podcast and that guy's whole movement.
Funny though.
But like,
go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, it's interesting to say that and be like, well, this is started because Nick Fuentes did this, that, the other kind of thing. But it's like, wasn't that the guy that had dinner with Donald Trump in the White House? Nick Fuentes, isn't that the guy that gave him a wrapped Tesla truck? Why don't we have a problem with these people when they're stirring the violence, but we seem to try to associate them with it after? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I saw a really funny meme that was like, Charlie never killed anyone. Charlie never broke in anyone's house. Charlie never stabbed anybody. He was hardly even involved in the Sharon Tate murders.
Hardly involved.
Well, you get the joke. Is they're talking about Uncle Charlie, not Charlie Kirk. They're talking about Charlie Manson. But the thing is his whole thing was the same kind of like misinformation, brainwashing, getting people to act out on his own word. And he didn't have the social media podcasts and the online presence to talk
Imagine
to a
if
lot
he
of people.
did.
But imagine if he did.
Imagine if he did.
Wouldn't don't you think he would be like a famous provocateur is my favorite word for these people? Because Charlie Kirk isn't a politician. He's not a
Although
podcaster.
he's receiving
He was a
full
person
military
that
honors in a funeral.
he was a person who would make money by saying offensive things and getting people's reaction to it. And for the people that think that he was a guy, we'll get into Charlie Kirk again, and I'll love to dive into him again. But for the people that think that Charlie Kirk was a debater, he would have people show up to his shows, to his live debates, crowds of people, all the people that were there that saw it. Those people were there to see Charlie. And then you have 10, 15, 20 people in line to debate, and those people don't do this for a living. Those people don't debate for a living. Those people, if you have a stand-up comedian who's a famous stand-up comedian who like Jim Ross, the roast master,
Jeff Ross,
who's a professional at roasting people. Jeff Ross, thank you, the roast master, who's a professional roaster, who can take insult comedy. The second he sees you, he's got 6 of them lined up, right? And then you have a guy who's just up there trying to make a point, or just trying to make the crowd laugh, trying to win the crowd over to his side. They're not there to be on your side. They're there to watch Jim Ross or Jeff Ross destroy you. And so when you have these people show up to his show, they're not there to watch the debate and to be won over. They're there to watch him say some snippety remark and say some off comment to someone who's trembling with a microphone because they're not used to public speaking.
And then let's also not,
it's ganging up. It's not a debate. It's just a gang up.
Let's also not forget that many of the students that are there in the crowd for Charlie Kirk are conservative kids who may or may not go to that school. Many of the people who jump on the mic will actually be of the school where he had been talking. Either here nor there. But
have you ever heard of Utah Valley before this?
Uvu? No.
I'd never heard of it either, but I can't think of another great way to get your university's name out there. Can you?
I mean,
I had never.
It's school shootings. It would be safe to go to.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's lightning doesn't strike twice, right? It's the
it's a reality
the largest...
we have to think about. You're dumb if you don't have to think about the reality. And
I
tell you as an educator, there's not a day.
The largest school in Utah, and I had no idea. I would have guessed Brigham Young.
In Utah?
Yeah, it's the largest campus, college campus in Utah.
I didn't know that.
I would have guessed BYU or even Utah State, but Utah Valley.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
No. So, well.
Now I have.
Yeah, sure have, And that's the thing too, right? It's the sad state of affairs of, now we all know what's going on there, right? So, and let's also not forget the fact that this can be classified as a school shooting. It was someone who came onto a campus and who shot somebody.
Let's also not be deaf to the fact that if that shooter had shot 10 people in the crowd and not Charlie Kirk, the Republicans would be using this, as a school shooting in their favor.
Yeah.
And they probably wouldn't care as much, frankly. The only reason they would is because he would have been there. It would have been a quicker mouthpiece for the direct evidence. But the same day there was a school shooting as him, there was a school shooting in Colorado. Yeah. And I haven't seen any coverage of that. I know very little about that. And that's going to be rectified here after this when I do a little reading. But I think that's a outcry and shame that type of stuff can happen and no one have any clue.
I think one of the kids that ended up getting shot, critically injured, did pass, at least one of them.
Great.
Yeah, I know.
As a father that just dropped my kid off from school and got to go pick her up in an hour, it's one of those things where you're like, do you Do you homeschool? How can you vet, you know, any school? How can you vet any classmate or parent of a classmate?
You want to cancel if
I lost you, Johnny B. You there? Well, welcome everyone to the Randall Show. Now that John's gone, hey. Oh, I guess he is gone. Well, he'll probably have to edit this part out.
I'm freaking out, man. You are freaking out, man.
we kind of tangents a little bit there. I think Randall's something to say about tariffs from what we were talking about around tangenting away from Kirk.
Just in my work experience, importing stuff from the United States and dealing with Canada and the tariff laws that exist there, it's directly evident that, and I think it's obviously proven, which was a funny thing, we have to even have the conversation, that the consumer pays the tariff. The consumer ends up paying the tax. And the big argument before and during the election and during the campaign of the election was, who pays the tax? Oh, we'll make them pay the tariffs. We're going to be swimming in so much money from all this tax money that their country is going to have to pay us. And it's silly to even suggest that. And now, having seen it, several months in practice, just for example, I had to send my company, they're having a trade show up in Canada in a couple of weeks. I had to send them some promotional material that we have for our business. It was, some reusable grocery bags with a company name,
swag,
stuff like that, and a couple of swag stuff, that I had from another leftover event that we did that we were down here in
we all get
California.
if you didn't know that, or stuff we all get if you didn't know.
Swag stuff we all get, shit we all get. But so I had this extra stuff from leftover from an event in California. So it had come back to my home with me and was sitting in my garage. They realized, oh, hey, we're going to need some stuff for this event. Let's go look at our inventory. Inventory was low. Rather than putting in a new order, they just called me and they're like, hey, you saw that leftover stuff from that last show. Can you send that to us and we'll just move it over? Now, I had to take this down to the post office and mail this up to Vancouver. It cost $60 to do a 3-day, uninsured ground transit or whatever we transit. The least expensive option, $60. And this box costs probably $150 worth of stuff inside, maybe $200 worth of stuff inside. So it cost, almost a third of the cost of the materials just to send the package
for shipping.
And then after doing all the taxes, after paying for the postage through the USPS, this is the federal USPS, it cost that much money. They then had to have me have a sign off to letting me know that it was going to cost an additional $40 American for them to obtain the package in Canada.
We're at $100.
They have to go to the, and I said, what's that? And she goes, well, that's the tariff. And I was like, oh.
Mm-hmm.
So me mailing something to this woman, because it was in a business sense with business material inside, costs them now $40 American, which Canadian is really like $68, $70 Canadian to obtain the package from the post office there. So the tariff is paid by the consumer, by the individual who receives the good, is the person paying the tariff. And that goes both ways, but we send a lot less up there than we receive in trade with Canada.
You know what's wild about that too, as far as the products that Canadians buy from us, that were the first ones to be politicized, and honestly, because it was a big market for us, was specifically bourbon.
Yeah, Jack Daniel's whiskey.
Jack Daniel's and bourbon from Kentucky and Tennessee, American-made products, right?
Yeah.
Made by people who probably, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if you want to lump people together, you could probably assume who they voted for. The first ones to take a huge hit with those products
Well, I think Kentucky has been run by Republicans since for the past like 70 years. I'll look while you talk.
let's also not forget the timeline we're living in, that we also agree with some Kentucky lawmakers right now, which is, where did we get here? Is it, the broken clock is right twice a day, or are we actually starting to see some common sense stuff here? With Massey and his release, petition for the release of the files and this and that.
1958 was the last time there was a Democratic leader of Kentucky.
That's a long time.
So, yeah, but it's been a while. But hey, it takes a lot to be one of the top 5 least educated states according to the internet.
Yeah. And we say this with the tone of crass and a tone of sarcasm, but it's shrewdness, but it also comes from
facts,
and it comes from a place I think Randall and I will tease out more as this podcast goes on, is that I don't think you could describe either of us as left or right. I think you could describe us as people who are concerned for everybody, concerned for average, everyday Americans. We're concerned in the rise of political violence. We're concerned with the lack of discourse in the public setting, people entrenching themselves further into their position, and, essentially forgetting powers that be live on both sides, and powers that be want to keep us apart and separated. So I think also
it's also an opportunity for us to identify room for improvement.
Yes.
If I sound like I'm criticizing the education levels of the fine members of the state of Kentucky, citizens of the state of Kentucky, that's where we should be putting our money to improve.
Yeah.
That's where we should be targeting the home base for things to get better.
We also shouldn't forget quotes that our president makes, where he says things like, "Smart people don't like me," or "Smart people don't vote for me."
I love the uneducated.
I love the uneducated.
The poorly educated.
So what is that? Educated. So what does that mean about you potentially? What does that mean about you potentially? Think about that. How much does he have to think about you? Think about potentially, now that he's used and abused his MAGA base for what he needs, does he really need them at all to do what he needs to do?
I have a fun question to ask, where I've always said we need more regulated voters in this country, and that statement, when used by either side of the Democratic or Republican side of the coin, would be abused. Where you say, oh, we should have licensing in order to get your right to vote. Well, then that makes it difficult for people who don't have a driver's license to vote, which disenfranchises a huge section of the American population, which then doesn't give you see
all of New York potentially that takes public transportation.
Exactly. Like there's no easy way to do this. And I think that you should have to have, and I don't want to say an education in order to vote, because that's just, again, so misphrased, but you should be knowledgeable. You have to take a test in order to drive a car. You should be somewhat knowledgeable about how our system of government works, rather than just picking a color or picking a guy.
Like a hunter safety education class, like a civics class.
Like a hunter safety education course. You should be able to define gerrymandering if you want to vote. If you don't know what's happening in Texas and what's happening in California as a response to what's happening in Texas and possibly Illinois and possibly other states with the gerrymandering battle, if you want that, a right to vote, you should know what's happening with that, because the Republican government in Texas is currently trying to oust some of their democratically elected Democratic leadership from their state Congress, which then would change the number at the national level, giving Donald Trump 5 further seats, to which he wouldn't have by their current vote.
And a little bit of
and why that's important, though, is that can give the election, that can give the control over who owns the House for the next 2 years of Congress. If you don't know what gerrymandering is, you're probably getting taken advantage of.
Those who don't know who are listening, gerrymandering is essentially where politicians pick the voters rather than voters picking the politicians. That's what gerrymandering is all about. So James Tallarico right now is so vehemently opposed to, someone who I know that I support as someone who's just a little bit more commonsensical. I think he's making his run for U.S. Senate as well.
You can change any
For U.S.
state in the United States, even the most Democratic states like Massachusetts or the most Republican states like Louisiana. You can make either of those states turn blue if you redraw the district maps for each of the congressional votes, most often of which come from large city bases being Democratic, more rural areas being more Republican. That being said, if you redraw the maps to cut the city into largely Republican-held territories, those numbers don't mean anything now, and the area will turn red. The area will turn blue on demand. That's what's happening. That's what's happening and being done in the state of Texas right now. Is they are trying to change their redistricting map. Excuse me. They're trying to redistrict their existing map 5 years early than they're supposed to do it, which is every 10 years on the U.S. Census.
And it's another. We talk about abdication. It's another abdication of the independent state of Texas, essentially bending the knee to Trump. Similarly to the abdication of Congress with tariffs. Right? So yeah, when we talk about my lens on tariffs and what I do as a casual longshoreman here at one of the local ports is very instantaneous, where we see the effects of these tariffs go into place. Something that I knew going into the job, obviously, that you always need to be prepared for what could happen politically, because it is a political job just like any other. However, you cannot, from my firsthand experience, as far as speaking from experience, you can't tell me that what we're dealing with right now is anything more than Trump's economy with tariffs. There was one switch that happened, and one switch in the right now, but a multitude of factors leading up to, which we're talking about abdication. We're talking about branches of government giving their power away to another branch. Congress has the authority over tariffs. It's supposed to be set by Congress, by votes. It's not supposed to be set by the American president, by the president of the United States. That's not one of his duties. So we have abdicated. We have given to Trump his ability, and all of the presidents before him essentially have had some hand in tariffs when it's supposed to be a duty of Congress. I don't know if I mentioned earlier in the podcast, but you can make the argument that prior economies were due to prior presidents. You can make the argument that the 2008 crash, that it was due to Clinton's policies he enacted that led to where we were at. He pushed mortgages. He pushed the market, right? You could make that argument. You cannot, in my opinion, you cannot make the argument that Trump did not single-handedly lead to where we're at with this economy right now. Trying to say that Trump inherited the Biden economy, you are absolutely kidding yourself. If you would like to come on the podcast and defend that, we would love to have you on. I know at least one who would want to come on and try and defend that viewpoint. So if you're listening.
Several I'd like to see come on here, try to defend a lot of viewpoints.
So it's one of the things that I feel passionately about, why I'm talking the way I'm talking, because I'm now one of the victims of the Trump economy. And we talk about sympathy from boomers and sympathy from those in the public arena, and I'm not looking for any sort of sympathy. I'm looking to educate people to other people's reality, is that unemployment is going up. There will be bankruptcies go up. And for every point, I don't know the exact figure, from one of my favorite movies in The Big Short. Don't do that. Stop. Stop that.
Charlie, stop it. Stop. What? You have any idea what you just did?
come on, we just made the deal of our lifetimes. We should
You
celebrate.
just bet against the American economy.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means,
Oh.
if we're right, people lose homes, people lose jobs, people lose retirement savings, people lose pensions. You know what I hate about banking? It reduces people to numbers. Here's a number. Every 1% unemployment goes up, 40,000 people die. Did you know that?
No.
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that.
We were just excited, Just don't dance.
Right? These are real people's lives that are being affected here and now. And I can tell you, looking just from a personal standpoint, looking at my face in November 2023, when work was abundant, right? My level of the workforce down there at the port is the casual part-time workforce, but we were pretty much working full-time hours. Comparing just the look in my face compared to now, it's, pretty evident to see that things like this take a toll on people. When you take away the ability and the right for someone to work and, earn a living for their family, and it takes a toll, right? We all make choices that lead us to where we're at, but there's a lot of factors that are out of a lot of people's control right now. And it's very, powerless, leaves you feeling very powerless. So it leaves you feeling like you have no control over your own destiny. So it's pretty upsetting and it's pretty alarming when the disconnect has happened where people try and justify that this is not Trump's economy.
There were two prior times in the United States where there were major pushes to have foreign imports being tariffed. Neither of which ended well.
One of them is one
for
of
the
the
US
opening
economy.
scenes to Ferris Bueller's Day Off, if you know that scene from the movie.
In 1930, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or lowered, raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression.
George
That
Bush talking about isolationism and all the isms, whether you believe that he's being truthful or not. I personally don't believe he's actually being genuine, but he's talking about these things that are going to isolate us economically from the rest of the world.
even going back as far as 1890, future president at that time, McKinley, proposed taxes called the McKinley tariff. He was actually known as President Tariff when he was elected. That was where a lot of Donald Trump's slogans that they used about tariffs came from, was the McKinley administration. He ran on the guise of tariffs on domestic imports of sugar, molasses, tobacco, a couple other things that we didn't have here in the United States at that time. Tobacco, I'm not sure if it was on the list, but it was things that you would expect from the 1890s imports domestically. And that he argued that would create jobs, and that led to a depression and no jobs. So there was never really an effect, a positive effect of nationwide tariffs being levied that ended up positively for the civilization base that they're, or citizen base that they were, being given.
The intent is to bring back the manufacturing, right? That is the intent here. However futile it may be, that's the intent. And I think that the intent is a worthy cause. I believe that more decent paying jobs would help out our economy. I do. I think that what Randall and I are kind of more advocating for is that slapping tariffs on things isn't necessarily just going to overnight bring back manufacturing. You look at who we're competing with on the global scale with China, who and other economies that heavily invested for years to build up their manufacturing. you talk about shipbuilding capacity of China versus the United States, right? From a global economic standpoint. And I think that their shipbuilding capacity is 35, 40 times ours, you know?
I know it's more than ours, but I actually do not trust a lot of the building capacity of Chinese hardware. And I don't want to make that sound like in a negative way. I just know, like, I know they have a phrase called tofu drag construction. Have you heard of that? Where things are being built very poorly and very shoddily and kind of hidden in like a secret way. So I'm not sure really how I don't know of anyone who could speak to what's happening in China at like a party level and their capacities without there being some there with statistics.
For sure.
With
I think that though when you are the world's factory, you can take some liberties with maybe not quite to that extent, but you can take some liberties with more than what potentially we have. And
have you seen that mega dam they're building?
No.
There's this new mega dam they're building that's supposed to, but there's this new mega dam they're building that's it's supposed to be like 3 Hoover dams combined in size. It's going to be like the
like
heaviest
the
thing in
the Shangji River or something like that, or with the big ones.
I'm not 100% sure. I think it was on the Yellow River. But I don't know if you could dam that one now that I'm thinking about it. I don't know. We'll have to look. But I do know that this dam is supposed to be like the when it's completed, it will be like the largest human constructed project on Earth.
Wow.
But that's one of those things where you can look at and just be like, I hope that's being built safely, because if it isn't, that's going to cause millions of deaths.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff with Chinese build with like their infrastructure that is pretty questionable right now in the past like 10 years.
Don't we though? Like, so are you familiar? So the irony though in comparing efficiency to China in such an example of did you see what happened with the Buckley Enumclaw Bridge? Were you privy to that news where a truck ran in? Okay, so a truck runs into the bridge, takes out one of the supports. Now people who live out in Enumclaw, if they want to get to like Pierce County, like lower Pierce County, Puyallup, Spanaway, whatever in that area, it takes them an hour longer, right? So a lot of what I saw was people who are comparing our capacity to China. It's like I saw this video of these Chinese workers putting up this thing overnight kind of deal, right? Which is kind of funny. It's funny
like the
for
Amish building a barn.
It's funny for the America First crowd to even make comparisons like that, though, right? They're saying we should be able to get this up faster. Like, yeah, we should, but why are we so quick to compare? You know what? Why are we using how quick, say, a Chinese bridge building company could get it built? Why are we using that as the gold standard? Why are we, are we admitting that our system has room for improvement? Is that what we're admitting? What bush are we beating around here? So
I think that's one of those points that when people make, it kind of says a lot more about their stance than the intended effect that they're going for. So when they're like, wow, these Chinese people can build something in 3 days. Why can't we do that here in America? Well, meanwhile, you have people in the government that are famous for underpaying construction workers.
Mm-hmm. But somehow unions will be to blame somehow.
Well, you have current presidents who have gone out of their way to stiff construction workers. So it's one of those things where like the same people that are making those comparisons. So we'll look at them getting this done in China and kind of downplaying, the American worker are the same people that are undercutting the American worker. So it's sad to see them being supportive of the people who aren't there to fight for them.
Right. Yeah. Well, we are the Knights of the Round Table podcast. Expect to hear a few more episodes here in the coming up before we actually have some guests on. But we definitely hope that you are listening to these first podcasts and If you want to be a part of the Knights of the Wrong Table community, and if you want to come on as a guest, we would love to have you. I think Randall already said that our intent is not to put people's info out there. Our intent is not to dox people. Our intent is not to do harm. Our intent is to come to some understanding of where we're at right now as a nation. And
Yeah,
as a
the
community.
last thing we want to do is engage in a whataboutism, because that's endless. It's that can go on forever. What we hope to do is have an actual practicable conversation that if it doesn't lead to change, it at least opens someone's eyes to a viewpoint or to a an argument they haven't heard before, or maybe opens their eyes to something about their current existing perspective that makes them kind of think about it. Because that's a lot of thing. I think a problem with a lot of people today is they make decisions or rash supporting, decide to support someone based off of a quick decision without really thinking about what then there happens because of that.
Something we can all be guilty of, for sure.